Welcome to another broadcast of Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are archived. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. And now here's your host, Mr. Arthur D. Schwartz.
Well, hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Another year. What a year we had just concluding. Well, tonight's show is called Consciousness and the Shaping of Reality. And this is a subject that's very important to me. In fact, I am and have been planning to write a book philosophically, of a philosophical nature, more philosophic than scientific, but some science, a good dose of science as well. And I've been playing for a long time, and it's funny how things, come together. I'm pretty sure those of you out there experience the same thing. You have something in your mind, and you begin to work towards a particular end, and before you know it, something happens. I remember doing something, and suddenly I got an email out of the blue with regarding to a particular project. It was so weird because I would never get this kind of an email, but suddenly it came. And I'm sure this happens to a lot of people. And the subject of, in general, the shaping of reality. That is a topic that I'm hopefully going to. Well, since it's the beginning of the year, maybe I can finish the book. It's not going to take 12 years like my last one did. And this one, maybe I can get it done in a year. And I think the stars are aligning because of the synchronicity thing. The synchronicity of things happening just at the right time. It seems to be coincidental. So one of the synchronicities just happened to me. A couple of things happened along this regard. In other words, I'm talking about the synchronicity in my own life of the subject of synchronicity, because I'm interested in, shaping reality and synchronicity have something to do with one another. And something came up, which I'm going to be writing another book, actually, but of a different quality, a different type, it's a more mainstream. It has to do with sports, without going in particular. And this will give another dimension to the same topic. That's in addition to the philosophical book that I was referring to. But what I'm really driving at is just the other night, I think the day before yesterday or day before that, earlier this week, on Coast to Coast AM, I was listening, and George Norrie was interviewing this guy, Dr. Kirby Surprise. His last name is interesting, isn't it? Dr. Kirby Surprise. And he wrote this book called Synchronicity, The Art of The Art of Coincidence, Choice, and Unlocking Your Mind. And he was talking about, and again, I didn't read the book, so I want to just say I'm going to talk about the book to a certain extent here, and I haven't read it at all. I just listened to parts of the conversation. And I was in bed dozing off. The show is very late at night. But in the book, I guess, was published in 2012, so it's been around. But the interview just was the other day, and he came up with a presentation that explains synchronicity. Of course, the term was invented by Carl Jung. And he himself wrote his paper, Synchronicity, which I happen to have. That's basically, he created this field seems to be parapsychology, but it also borders on science. And just looking at the books that have been published on the subject, I guess it's really catching on. Anyway, I'm meandering, but I was listening to Dr. Surprise talk, and I was really fascinated by what he had to say, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. And I also, just as a side, I remember before I get into Dr. Surprise's book, a few years back, I think it was maybe 3 years, something like that. Don't think it was even 4 years. I want to say it's like 3 years. I could be a little bit wrong on that. And he had another, either a physicist or I think it was an astronomer. I tried to dig it up, doing searches, and I couldn't find him. So if anyone out there knows who I'm talking about, but it was an astronomer, a mainstream astronomer, and he too was talking about the power of the mind to create reality, and the universe is all part of our individual perception. And I'm doing the best to articulate what I heard on this interview, some years back. And I really couldn't find his name by doing a search, because I guess I just wasn't putting in the right keywords, because it's been a while. But anyway, on Coast to Coast, I heard that, and it really intrigued me. Now, this one intrigued me even more, because this book, the way the author, Dr. Kirby Surprise, describes it, really does give a theoretical explanation of a lot of parapsychology. Actually, I would call it psychokinesis. I'm not sure where he lands in psychokinesis. I know in the interview he said he didn't really know much more evidence to it. But what happened is he came up with a conception that really makes a heck of a lot of sense. And so what I think I'm going to do is to the best I can, not having read the book yet, I'm certainly going to order it. And just based upon only listening to part of the conversation, because it resonated so deeply for me, half asleep though I was, I want to try to explain. So he talked about the circumstance of Dr. Rhine from Duke, who did the famous experiments on parapsychology and precognition, and I probably psychokinesis, yes, and psychokinesis as well. And so what got Rhine interested in parapsychology was this idea that by focusing on the roll of dice, that it would have an influence. And so he actually started rolling the dice, and by having a machine operated, so there's no human intervention, and having individuals focus on that, I guess, a particular roll, a particular dice, a particular what am I trying to say here? Because I'm not a gambler, but the dice will come up in a certain sequence, or there will be a certain side of the dice that would be the number, 3, 6, 3s, or how I think it's 1 to 6. By the way, I didn't say before, but I let Scott know that he's free to jump in at any point. So, Scott, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You gamble at all? You roll dice?
Oh, I used to in my teenage years.
So it's 1 through 6, right?
Right. That's the dice is 1 through 6, correct?
Okay. So one of Dr. Rice's earliest experience that he had machines doing, and the participant in the experiment would be focusing on the particular number that is going to predominate, or have at least a certain number of rolls in terms of the sequence he was doing, and it came that between 3 and 6% consistently worked. So there was an influence of 3 to 6% beyond the beyond chance for that particular role. And I'm probably explaining this not quite correctly, but it's good enough. That came out 3 to 6% above the chance if no one was focusing consistently. Now, and this, of course, this blends together with the very famous work on with the same idea in terms of random number generators. Of course, anyone who's interested in this, the book Margins of Reality by Robert John and Brenda J. Dunn. Robert G. John and Brenda J. Dunn, scientists at Princeton. The Princeton they had the Princeton Center. I think it's still in another guise now. It's still operating, I heard, but I think the original institute's closed. But he did these very famous experiments on random number generators, and the same thing. You know, when someone or people or a group would be focusing on the generator and predicting or focusing on a certain kind of a combination, I'm not sure exactly the experiment, they consistently showed an influence. Now, from what I heard in the conversation with Dr. Surprise the other night was, I think he mentioned random number generators. He said, regardless whether it's a machine physically flipping the dice or whether it's random number generators, they documented consistently 3 to 6%. Now, that is extremely interesting. Now, here's the thing that was, and this has been commented many times. There's many books, written about influencing reality. What surprised his name, I mean, come on, I have to laugh. But I'm sorry, Dr. Surprise, but what surprise came up with was that the human being or a conscious being has a 3 to 6% chance of influencing the results. Now, this is consistent with another great book that I've read years ago, but it's one of the best books I've written on the subject of parapsychology, was by Dean Radin, The Conscious Universe. It's published a while ago, back in, I think, 1990. Let's see, 1997. And he talked a lot about these meta, he talked about how some of these parapsychological experiments and psychokinesis or precognition or whatever, they did really weren't too impressive, one experiment at a time. But when he does these metadata, when he pools all the different experiments together, that it comes up far beyond chance, millions of times sometimes above chance. And the thing about what he explained in parapsychology, you don't get the kind of experiments consistently like, electrical circuit, light bulb, turn the switch, and you have the light go on. The frustrating thing about parapsychology, you don't get that kind of consistent response. But what Surprise said in that we have a 3 to 6% chance, that indicates why there's the inconsistency. For example, he gave the example of, well, if that's the case, why don't we just bet on the lottery and we're going to become, billionaires or whatever, because you can consistently win the lottery. But he explained why that's not the case. Because in a lottery, you have probably millions of possible combinations. So 3 to 6% is not really going to do too much when you're dealing with millions of combinations. So it really gives a sense of how parapsychology might work in the context of quantum physics. This is all connected with quantum physics because, of course, if anyone who studied a little bit or read a little bit about quantum physics, one of the most famous aspects of the field is that particles like photons can be influenced when it is being perceived, when it is being observed. It doesn't have to be by a human being. It could be a machine, like a camera, that observes it. So there's this famous experiment called the slit experiment. So I forget, but anyway, you have these like sort of two photons, and they're going in different directions. And if it's not, it's not being recorded, they're gonna both go their own way. But if it's being recorded by a camera, that it will collapse and go one way or the other. Once again, I probably did a pretty poor explanation, but I'm just giving the sense of, in quantum physics, the observation is very important. And so they're dealing with quantum particles, subatomic particles, and subatomic particles seem to be very influenced by observation. So I am speaking in the most, how shall I say, unscientific, talking very much of a layman who's read some books and no means by any stretch of the imagination am I anything kind of, would even, not forget being an expert, even particularly well-read. I want to read more. I mean, I've read books on it, but many others have read more than I have, and I haven't read any lately, even though I'm planning on getting back into this field. But the thing is that you see what's possible, that you have an explanation of how the mind can shape reality. Because what Dr. Surprise said was that what actually happens is that when a conscious mind focuses on phenomena, that phenomena now has an increased probability, not certainty, but probability of going in that direction. Now, I know in Coast to Coast, I think George Norrie, I mean, I haven't heard these experiments, but I think he talked a lot about, he asked his listeners, to focus on a storm in, let's say, in the Caribbean, and to focus that it moves or goes out to sea, so to protect, human lives. And he claims that, I think, that it worked. Well, I think the idea is that as more people focus, there is a kind of power of numbers. So if you have thousands or millions of minds, you have more of an influence. Of course, with that a random number generator experiment, it's been often reported that there's a spike during world events. There was a spike towards 9/11. There was a spike towards other, I'm not, maybe, I guess this is all done after JFK. But when there have been very important events, there's a spike indicating that consciousness has interrupted the standard influences that bear on a random number generator. The random number generator, again, it's all quantum because the random number generator is just all, quantum particles, operating this electronic device. I mean, I believe so. I mean, I think that's fair to say. And so the thing is that this gives a kind of a scientific understanding of shifting probability because that is what the quantum physics is about in many ways, as I understand it, or at least in this particular aspect, that the mind can influence. Now, I can't understand exactly how that happens, except to say that the old cliche, everything is connected, and somehow in the quantum world, space does not matter. Because two particles that have been in contact with each other influence each other. What Einstein called spooky action, I think, from a distance. How does it happen? All kinds of weird stuff. And more and more, it seems to be, just going online and looking at some stuff, it seems to be more and more books are coming out on this very subject. And I think that in the 21st century, the century we are now in, we are really going to have a revolution of sorts that pushes science in a new direction. As a matter of fact, it might be that very counterweight to the singularity that people like Ray Kurzweil talk about, the technological singularity, where suddenly machines take over because they enter into a sphere where it predominates over human intelligence, and so it's unpredictable. Well, wouldn't it be something if there's a revolution in parapsychology, where parapsychology and the notion of consciousness shaping reality, influencing the world, influencing, for example, medical care, that, of course, part of parapsychology is work has been done, prayer and so forth, some experiments, and it's debatable, but show that they have an effect. But if this should advance, and if focused consciousness, or if the consciousness of your own self, your own mind upon your own body would be able to cure disease, which to me seems quite possible personally, then you have a kind of counterweight to the arguments of the coming singularity, such as, Ray Kurzweil is the most, or Kurzweil is the most well-known figure, at least to the general, to the general public. So that's the thing. Shaping reality, having a sense that by shaping reality, we make it more possible for something to happen. Now, here is the thing. That can be good enough. If you have two huge rampaging floods, and they're heading in a certain direction, one coming north and one going south, and the one going south, let's say, happens to reach a canyon of some sort, and it's diverted. Well, that diversion might be critical, wouldn't it? So that's 3 or 6%. You don't have to have 100% that, okay, I'm going to focus on something, and presto, I just built a skyscraper in my own head, and it just appeared. No, that's not going to happen. Not in any context of anything we can imagine, realistically, right? Ever. But who knows? That forever is a long time. But it doesn't take much. Just all you need is that 3 to 6% structure, or that 3 to 6% influence, and then the work that's done on its behalf by hard work, by persuasion, by experimentation, by organization, and so forth and so on, then it begins to move in that direction, that 3 to 6% influence that Dr. Surprise talked about, that Dr. Ryan, well, I'm forgetting Dr. Ryan's name, the great scientist. He's passed on now. He was at, was he Duke or was it North Carolina? I always forget those two. I think it was at Duke. I'll look it up. And that is what, that's 3 to 6%. To me, that can be one of the most important discoveries in the history of science, if you think about it. It doesn't seem that way now, of course. But if you listen to what I'm saying, Ryan, Joseph Ryan, Joseph Ryan, and if you think about it, it is, because it can change everything. Now, the thing is it changing it for good or for bad, for good or evil? There's the question. And so this subject and this book that I'm beginning to work on. Maybe we'll call today the inauguration of my efforts towards that, because I have been talking about it for a year and haven't gotten started because I have had so much stuff going on. I just moved again. And there's a little bit of a synchronicity there, but I won't get into that. That this can be something. Well, let me just back up a second. So what I was saying before, that there is a certain synchronicity, you might say, with my first book, Ethical Empowerment, because of what I just said. My thought of ethics is very similar. It has to do with rules that are not rigid but guided. And so if we begin to have the power of shaping reality, if it's guided by loving intention, which I feel is the core of ethics or the core principle, and that now allows a diversity of possibilities, but under the spectrum of ethics or of what we would, of a moral state of life, and they have to work together. And so there is a confluence between a reality that is flexible and malleable and within, at least to some degree, the intention of consciousness. And so if you have an intention of consciousness, you clearly see the link, the strong and unavoidable link with ethics. And so there's a connection between my book, my first book, and the one I'm beginning to plan now, which I hope to get out now, possibly within this year. So I think right now I'm going to take a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
In Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms, Arthur D. Schwartz presents an ethical theory that is a framework for evaluating moral conundrums that go beyond legalistic rulemaking, dogmatism, and preconditioned thinking. The book is as much an ethical framework for unconventional ideas as it is for staying with convention. Ethical Empowerment is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. Ultimately, the hypnotic thinking of ideology and dogmatism can only be overcome by returning to the true source and essence of morality, which is nothing less than universal love. Discover how the philosophically liberating approach of the ethical empowerment can be applied to the range of ethical, social, and political controversy. Read about a plan to eliminate all political parties. Entertain the possibility of an overhaul of the patent system and its replacement with a system that rewards inventors while eliminating monopolistic control of patents and technological suppression. Many other transformative ideas are discussed in the book, including issues related to the monetary system, real estate, scientific paradigms, and a rational approach to conspiracy theory. While ethical empowerment will challenge your mind to consider new perspectives, the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of perspective within the boundaries of love. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and e-book editions.
This is George Thorogood of the Destroyers, and you're listening to ArtistFirst Radio.
Are you a person who enjoys intellectual social interaction and finds digging deeper into the nature of things, from big issues to everyday life, an important part of the pleasure of life? Social Philosophizers is a Boston area social club for those who desire intellectual socializing. It's a club for both singles and non-singles, and for anyone who finds intellectually mingling to be the best form of social mingling. The club offers a variety of interesting venues such as philosophical get-togethers in private venues, book discussions concerning literature and philosophy, topical discussions over brunch or dinner, guest speakers, theater, after-work mixers, even long philosophical ruminations along nature trails or city streets, and more. If you live in the greater Boston area or occasionally spend time in the area, you can choose a cost-effective membership level that's right for you. Basic membership is free. Find the link on Arthur's Philosophical Perspectives show page at ArtistFirst.com or just search socialphilosophizers.com. We hope you'll join Social Philosophizers today. That's socialphilosophizers.com. Thank you for being a cool, hip person, because you are listening to Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Now back to your host, Arthur D. Schwartz.
Welcome back. Yes, all you cool, hip people. Now, I started the conversation by referencing this book that I just became aware of called Synchronicity, The Art of Coincidence, Choice, and Unlocking Your Mind by Dr. Kirby Surprise. And I used to listen to it on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. I think it was, this is Wednesday, I think it was Monday. I think it must have been Monday. This is Wednesday, so it's probably Monday. Or last night. No, Monday. It was Monday. So I was, one thing I became aware is, boy, this subject is really exploding. I knew it was always big. I didn't really quite notice how big. It's really funny when you plug in a few keywords or whatever, and sometimes you think you know what's out there, but just by using a different keyword, you realize you're kind of missing something. Depends how good the search happens to be. Because synchronicity is a key word in parapsychology, certainly. However, it's not the most. Probably parapsychology, for example, is more. But if depending upon what keyword you look for, let's say on Amazon, you won't get the other book. And so when you plug in synchronicity, or when you look for shaping reality, things like that, you get a whole slew of other books that I really wasn't aware of, and it's kind of embarrassing in a way. I became really interested in this subject, I would say, about 20 years ago, and did some reading, and then kind of went in a different direction. But this thing with parapsychology is really, I think, extremely important, and the day is going to come, and I think probably in the not-too-distant future, when we will look back at how very intelligent and esteemed scientists devoted their lives to this field, and basically, if not laughed upon, were ignored or dismissed as not serious scientists. And the day is going to come where the fruit, when the fruit of all this hard work is going to come forward. There's so many examples. I feel this way about free energy and a lot of things, and a lot of people who are interested in alternative disciplines feel this way. But in the case of parapsychology, something is going to happen. And you know why? It's because with the way Dr. Surprise phrased, and of course, what he said that 3 to 6%, I mean, he was actually just quoting what Joseph Rhine stated in terms of if I recollect correctly what he said, that it was Rhine who came up with 3 to 6%, and so now Dr. Surprise was talking about the 3 to 6% is what happens is that's how we have this influence over reality. It's 3 to 6%. It has an influence, but it doesn't dominate. But sometimes it can. And why does it? I would simply call it, it's the tipping point, you might say. That was the author of The Tipping Point was Malcolm Gladwell, I believe. And it could be, like I said, the tipping point, because it's once you have that extra influence, it's common sense. I mean, it's the classic, thing about the one grain of sand finally tips the balance, or what's the other expression about do you know the expression, Scott? What I'm looking for there? I've
heard similar ones. A butterfly lands on something, and the weight of the butterfly.
Yeah, I mean, it's the tipping point, because so if we have a 3 to 6% influence, and if you get a large enough movement, this course is two ways to look at it. We could look at individuals who have a great influence, and that you're using it in your own personal life, and yet that happens too, because in personal matters, you have your 3% influence and 3 to 6% influence, and if you focus on that, you might have an advantage over somebody else, a competitor or somebody else. I think that's possible. But now, if you bring together large groups of people and large movements, and when we understand this process more, it could be that little extra that makes all the difference. So, I mean, that's a scary thing as well. I know that I have a book that Hitler's called Hitler's Black Magic, Hitler Black Magic or whatever, and he was known, and he and the Nazis were known to dabble in black magic. And in that book, too, they talked about it's just about focus, and it's just somehow when you focus. And so anyway, the point being there, you can have this can be used for incredibly evil purposes. That's the scary thing about it. That's why parapsychology has to be married to an ethics that is flexible enough to be embedded in its usage. So that's why I recommend Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms, because when we have these 3 to 6% programs of influence so that we can influence the way of the world, that's the book to follow. But I'm, in all seriousness, I do believe that because the fact that the Nazis were into black magic, and they actually believe this, actually it's a kind of scary thing, and it does probably show that in a negative way how it is some evidence for saying this, because let's face it, I mean, when you see the rise of Nazism in Germany, when you read about it and look at the newsreels and all that, you just kind of have to scratch your head, right? It's like, whoa, how did this happen? And so, and now you have, he was able to whip up the people into a frenzy, and well, anyway, I'm not saying that's how it happened, but I guess some people believe it did. I would say that extra 3 to 6% might have had something to do with it. I really do. And there's nothing really weird about that. if you're looking at mass numbers of people in mass political movements and mass cultural movements, and if there's anything to this idea of consciousness having an influence, well then obviously 3 to 6% that is being marshaled on behalf of millions and millions of people who are in a group thinking the same way, yeah, I think that makes sense. So it's really an interesting thing. But you know what? I think that's not, there's really nothing special about that thought because, the United States Constitution is designed to prevent mob rule. It may not have worked so well in the last election. We'll have to wait and see now. So there's nothing special about this 3 to 6% extra, influence, because no matter how the influence gets there, we have to have political machinery to sort of prevent, serious human right violations. Let's put it that way. And so there's nothing really strange about that. To me, really, though, the thing is through the power of the mind, it is possible to break new ground, have new ideas leap over the same old, the same conservative or overly traditional or overly restrictive or overly self-limiting conception of reality. So we're stunting our growth because we can't see over the same old, same old. That is really my interest. So when you're saying that extra 3 to 6% influence, I'm talking about changing reality in a way that has sometimes perhaps not even been conceived of. To leap over the unthinkable, but in a good way. So that's what I'm thinking about. You have any comments on that there, Scott? Did I get you at a bad time?
No, I wasn't making it. I'm speechless. You're a tough act to follow there.
Well, I'm just meandering, So I'll just keep going. But here's a comment I want to make, because I jotted this down before the show. Because, most scientists talk about the Big Bang. And so the Big Bang, as far as I understand it, of course, it's incomprehensible. I mean, the entire universe was condensed down to something the size of a peanut or something, or a walnut.
Smaller than that.
What's that?
Smaller than that.
Smaller than that.
An infinitesimally small point.
Oh, infinitesimal point. You can tell it's been a long day.
Really small.
Infinitesimally.
Really, really small.
Really, really tiny, tiny, tiny. Really tiny, tiny, teeny. But then when the Big Bang came about, everything is pure energy. Everything is pure energy. There were no atoms. There probably weren't even any of most of the subatomic particles. That all those things came to coalesce and form after the Big Bang. The galaxies and the planets and the heavenly bodies and everything else, that took millions and billions of years to form. There were no atoms whatsoever. The atom itself is a dramatic evolution, right, of having a little kind of a solar system in the scale of an atom, with the protons and the neutrons and the electrons and all the things going on in there. Now, here is my point. After the Big Bang, everything is pure energy. Consciousness, if there was, and I do believe that consciousness is embedded on a parallel level with matter. Consciousness is, if quantum physics is right, if the subject of influencing reality is right, then the whole universe is nothing but particles like photons and the like that can be influenced by a conscious mind. Because the particles, the subatomic particles, are much more easily influenced than macro objects like we have today, matter, and big objects, not to mention planets and solar systems. Okay, we're going to take another break, and we'll be back shortly.
Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many transformative ideas discussed in Ethical Empowerment is a new type of patent system that would dramatically expedite the development of inventions by fairly rewarding inventors while at the same time eliminating monopolistic control of patents and threats of technological suppression. This proposal for a new patent system would unleash a new era of technology that has hitherto been thought impossible, and empower a new era of economic flourishing. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
This is Arthur D. Schwartz. Beliefs and disbeliefs can be very powerful. Much like philosophy, hypnotism is concerned with belief. Hypnotherapy, a practical application of hypnotism, may largely be described as the practice of removing false beliefs that form mental blocks to success, to happiness, and to well-being. In my hypnotherapy and philosophical counseling practice, I combine my work in philosophy with hypnotism in order to clear mental blockages that can occur on both conscious and subconscious levels. A mental block may be conscious or subconscious and can be expressed, for example, in the form of anxiety, low self-esteem or low motivation, bad habits, tobacco habits, weight gain, low performance, and much more. If you are interested in using hypnosis and the power of the mind to overcome mental blocks and barriers that have emerged in your life, please feel free to give me a call at 617-964-4800 or visit www.integralhypnosis.com. That's INTEGRAL, hypnosis.com.
Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many topics discussed in Ethical Empowerment, in the section entitled Tales of the Pot and the Kettle, concerns the shouting matches between mainstream science and unconventional technologies that the mainstream loves to deride as pseudoscience. Some claimed inventions may well be hoaxes, but there is very good reason to believe that many others have been suppressed in order to retain monopoly control or for other unsavory reasons. Is free energy possible? Are cures for cancer being held back or impeded by big pharma and the medical establishment? To what extent may ego, money, and power stand in the way of revolutionary breakthroughs? Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
You are listening to Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Want to send a question or comment in? Hit us up at dj@artistfirst.com. Now back to your host, Arthur D. Schwartz.
Welcome back. Thanks for reminding me about my email. If you want to contact me, just send it to radio@arthurdschwartz.com. So I think we know the show today. We're coming to an end. We're going to be finishing up in just about 5 minutes or so. And I think I want to return to why, or how, I should say, I see this topic, which will be in the form of my next book. Actually, 2 books, like I said. One is going to be a very different nature, but sort of kind of with synchronicity. It came into my world where I'm going to be writing this book about something to do with creating reality on a very practical but very, very interesting and extraordinary level by a particular person that I know, and that has to do with athletics in part. But the thing about it is this is why do I feel this way about the connection between my first book, Ethical Empowerment? Because ethical empowerment is not a rule-based ethics. It starts with the idea of, well, not starts, but the principal concept of the ethics is of loving intention, love, and as the sort of the bridge between self and other, or the unifier between self and other. And then all the different factors that guide and influence in various ways the outcome, the effectuality, which is the effects and the consequences of that intention. Of course, the famous expression, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, is a wonderful saying, because it demonstrates that intention is not good enough. It has to be with intention, but also the skill and the aptitude in making sure the intention works out. Intention is wonderful. I would say intention is more important, but still, it's extremely, what the consequences are obviously extremely important as well, or ultimately more important. So therefore, it's both. It's just being well-intended is not good enough. You can be a well-intended idiot, right, who continually makes catastrophic mistakes. So that's not good either, right? So we need both. We don't want someone bad who has bad intentions. We want to have someone who knows what he's doing, or she is doing. Now, and I'm talking in terms of ourselves as well. So the idea is that it's very fluid, it's guided, but it's very formative, and it has permutations. It's not overly rigid. It allows expression of something beautiful because it is something totally unique. And when we think about the universe, I was just talking to Scott about multiple universes, and one universe may be giving birth to another universe. And the idea that maybe some people believe there's infinite universes, just some people say there are many universes. But that whole concept does show a kind of way in which creativity is part of the fabric of the deeper universe. And by the deeper universe, I'm saying that which is the father or the mother of all other universes. I know there's an infinite regress here. You can keep on going back and back and back and back and back, and you'll never come to an end to get to the real Father or the real Mother of all the universes. But the idea certainly is a demonstration, if true, of wonderful diversity of the expression. And I look at ethics that way to an extent. It's not infinite, because there are certainly things that are outside any conception of anyone who's trying to be ethics, living under the guidance of loving intention. But having said that, that leaves a lot of room, an awful lot of room, more room than we can imagine, when we begin to escape from arbitrary rules. And so once again, going back to science, alternative energy, alternative medicine, alternative health, alternative thinking allows us this freedom. And I think that is the spirit of what I've been talking about today, about the creative mind, about shaping reality and its relationship to the conscious mind. Well, I think that's going to close it out for today. I know my time is just coming to an end. So I want to thank Scott once again. It's always great to be with him on the show. And so this does conclude tonight's broadcast. For links to my book, Ethical Empowerment, my philosophical counseling and hypnotherapy practice, and the Social Philosophizers Club, please visit arthurdschwartz.com. And this is Arthur D. Schwartz reminding you to live well and think deeply. Until next time, good night, everybody.